what's clear is the U.S. and this administration is taking crypto leadership seriously.
President Trump signing an executive order to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but cryptocurrencies falling as traders seem disappointed with some of the details. In a post on X, the White House crypto czar, David Sachs, saying the reserve will be funded exclusively with Bitcoin seized in criminal and civil forfeiture cases. He also said no Bitcoin will be sold from the reserve. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had this to say about the reserve just a short time ago right here on Squawk Box.
I am a big proponent of the U.S. taking the worldwide lead in crypto. I think we have to bring it onshore and use our best practices and regulation. I think that the Bitcoin reserve, before you can accumulate it, you have to stop selling it. We're starting with Bitcoin, but it's an overall crypto reserve.
Right. Today, the White House hosting a digital asset summit. Attendees include Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, Strategy CEO Michael Saylor, Gemini co-founders Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, and our next guest as well. Joining us right here first on CNBC is Robinhood's co-founder and CEO Vlad Tenev. Good morning to you. There was a lot of debate about this beforehand from the crypto community, also the tech community, when it was first floated that there would be a Bitcoin reserve. And then just last week, this idea that other coins would be involved and that there was sort of a backlash to some of it. Now there's a different kind of backlash this morning saying maybe they didn't go far enough. What do you think?
Hey, Andrew, good to be here. I actually think this is a sensible approach by the administration. I think that, you know, there's a lot of debate. Obviously, there's some people in the industry that maybe wanted more or different assets. But I think this is an approach that isn't terribly controversial. It's a good place to start. And there's a lot of things that we need to get done. I agree with Secretary Bessent that the U.S. needs to be a leader in this new burgeoning industry. And, you know, there's stable coin that needs to be figured out, market structure, prediction markets. So I think as an industry, we have to join together, be united, and keep pushing to make the U.S. #1 in this industry.
Vlad, do you believe ultimately that the U.S. government and therefore U.S. taxpayers should be investing in and, let's be honest, levering themselves up to buy additional Bitcoin?
I think that the U.S. Has to make a determination about why it needs various cryptocurrencies and whether it needs them strategically. So I think that having some clarity on what happens in these cases where there's forfeiture or the U.S. Government somehow obtains it and whether, you know, they're selling it or holding it, that clarity is actually useful to the market because you've seen in cases like that that the uncertainty causes fear. So I think this is a good place to start. Now, how far it goes, I have sort of less of a strong opinion. I know others. There are other experts at the summit on Bitcoin strategic acquisition and other things.
I have two related questions. One is, this is an executive order, and I wish I'd actually had the opportunity to ask the Treasury Secretary this. Do you consider this an emergency?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that there's various definitions of what constitutes an emergency. But what's clear is the U.S. and this administration is taking crypto leadership seriously and acting with a great sense of urgency. And I think the summit that they're holding today at the White House is a great example of that. I mean, certainly the administration's moving fast, government's moving fast, but I think rapid change is necessary if we're going to maintain U.S. leadership in what's an increasingly uncertain world.
Well, to be honest, we unfortunately switched topics at one point.
And then
from that,
we could have gone. At the very end, you had the last two when they were jumping up and down.
There were a couple other things that I was hoping to.
Hey, Vlad, you seem. I mean, some people think all companies should have a treasury filled with Bitcoin. Could you ever see that being something that the United States would be, and it would probably be taxpayer money, but if it's going to 1 million, wouldn't that help in a lot of different ways for Treasury to have that reserve?
Well, I think that you get into the general question of should the U.S. be investing its money once you expand beyond Bitcoin into all sorts of other assets and potentially securities. And many countries have a sovereign wealth.
They buy gold.
Many countries have a sovereign wealth fund, which we're also instituting. So I don't think that's an
not us, but a lot of countries do.
Right. Hey, Vlad, not only are we potentially buying Bitcoin in the future, but these other coins as well. And I'm curious how you think about that. I'm also curious how you think about the fact that so many members of the administration are invested in crypto themselves, and that inherent conflict that I think is very visible to those who want to see it.
Well, from what I've seen, I think that everyone's aware of that concern, and most people that I've talked to have taken steps to actually make sure that they're not conflicted by, selling their exposure or otherwise making sure they're disinterested. I know there's been a lot of conversation about that. I think a lot of people in the administration are joining because they really see an opportunity to help and put their talents in making our country and our government work better. I'm excited to see them. They're moving incredibly fast, but I think it's necessary.
President Trump signing an executive order, we've been talking about it, to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Mackenzie Sagalis joins us now with more. We talked about it earlier, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but it was in the teleprompter, so it must be true. But it was disappointment about some details of the Bitcoin reserve caused Bitcoin to go down yesterday. Yeah, the crypto market has been plunging since last night on that. We know that it was because of what they said, or I mean, Bitcoin, moves 30% when does that in its sleep sometimes, over a period. Was there disappointment? If so, what was the disappointment? The big expectation was that we would see some sort of Bitcoin purchasing plan in tandem with the announcement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But the language in that executive order was very specific about it just meaning that we would hold on to what was already seized in criminal operations rather than roll out any sort of taxpayer dollars into a buying scheme. Who wants that? No one wants taxpayer dollars going into buy. Senator Lummis put forth a bill last year where you'd buy 1 million Bitcoin over the course of 5 years. You'd hold on to that for 20 years and periodically sell it off to pay down the multi-trillion-dollar deficit. Why we've sold in the past when we've come across some Bitcoin one way or another, and we sold it when it would have bought a pizza, and now it would buy a building. Well, and that goes to the larger thesis here. Some people are actually pleased to see that we would have this, strategy where the U.S. government would hold on to Bitcoin, because the benefit here, the argument is that it would be a hedge against inflation because there's this capped supply of 21 million tokens. Right. And so if you have that backing up the U.S. dollar, it would protect against inflationary pressures that would hit other fiat currencies. There's also this idea that it would diversify what we already have in our national reserves, other assets like a gold that might be more sensitive to central bank policies. What I will say, though, Bitcoin moves on Fed decisions. When the rate is hiked or is cut, Bitcoin price responds. Plus, governments around the world are not unanimous in believing Bitcoin is anything at this point. Well, maybe we are. There's still people that don't believe it's actually a store of value. There's people that still argue it could go to zero. Yeah, but there are a lot of members of the G20 who might follow suit. And I was talking to Brian Armstrong last night ahead of this summit today, and he's one of the members who's been advising the Trump transition team since the campaign trail. And he made the point that he thinks a lot of countries are going to follow. I know of already Middle Eastern countries, Gulf states, that have been looking into a Bitcoin buying strategy. There's also reportedly, conversations within the Chinese government to look to follow suit if the government in the U.S. makes this move to roll out a purchase plan.
But there is no purchase plan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, China used to be one of the epicenters for Bitcoin mining. It's very easy for them. They have all of this hydropower, and so they already have all the facilities, and they banned it a couple of years ago, but it takes nothing to turn it back on. And then, similar to Iran evading sanctions by just mining Bitcoin, they already have it on hand.
Right, but if we're not really buying it, right, we're not going to be buying it. You agree with that?
I think that right now we have around $17 billion worth of Bitcoin, and holding on to that is enough of a signal that other countries would follow suit. I think that there is an intention. I mean, some of the language in that EO did say that if they could find budget-neutral ways to add it to our balance sheet, they would investigate that. Now, that, of course, stops short of a buying plan, but it signals that they're open to some way to do this if it doesn't take taxpayer dollars.
Do you know of a way they could do it without taking taxpayer dollars? No,
I mean,
honestly,
yeah.
I say that because it's the craziest. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my whole life.
Well, what's interesting to me is that President Trump spent a lot of time with Bitcoin miners on the campaign trail, and it goes to that larger thesis of other countries that are turning either sanctioned energy in the case of Iran or, idle resources into Bitcoin. So that's a way to generate it. And yes, you have like the energy inputs, but some of the biggest miners in the world are based in the United States. Core Scientific has a lot of operations across the country.
And if it goes to 1 million, it's a great idea. If it goes down a lot, it's a horrible idea. El Salvador is one place.
And they're getting hit hard by the IMF right now.
Right, but which countries are just totally Bitcoin non-believers? Any of the majors countries? And there are some countries that probably need it more than any other countries because of their problem with hyperinflation. But there are countries that aren't going to do this, at least till it's, the proof is in the
China.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are countries that have flip-flopped, right? If you have countries that subsidize energy power, and then you had a bunch of Bitcoin miners come in because they saw a chance to, Kazakhstan, China at one point, to your point, Becky, have had systems where they start to ban the operation altogether or heavily tax it to try to disincentivize people coming in to use this cheaper energy to mine the token.
Right.